morning and good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. There we go. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Kirsten, and welcome to our Building Momentum event. So, you know Leti, you know Kenji, and let's get our amazing day started. Do you guys want to tell them a little bit about what we're doing today?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Building Momentum. We're really excited to have you here. Today, we're going to do a quick presentation, but really Building Momentum is about helping all of you, no matter where you are in your journey, to kind of build some momentum to be able to go to the next level. And so we have a really cool day planned out for you with us and Jesse and Kirsten and some of our team members to help you be able to take your real estate portfolio to that next level.
Yeah, and this isn't the first time we've done this. You know, we've done this before and it had really good reviews. People got a lot of value out of it. So we wanted to make sure that we provided it for our Empire builders and people who have taken our courses. And especially now when there's so much uncertainty out there, it's easy to lose momentum, right? Think about rising mortgage rates, think about inflation. And I know, you know, we've seen all the questions, the concerns, the fear, and again, it's really easy to lose momentum. And so what we wanted to make sure we do is we talk about that. We talk about the uncertainty. We talk about how to overcome that uncertainty. And that's really what we're going to focus on in this morning session. And then the other sessions that we have for you are really designed to tell you about all the resources that are available to you. When we did this event before, a lot of the people, the feedback that we got was, wow, I didn't even know that all these resources were available to me. And now I know how I can tap into it and build that momentum for myself. So again, we wanted to offer this to everybody in Empire Builders and our past course participants so that you guys can, like as Leti said, take your portfolio to the next level. If you're stuck now, get unstuck and start to build that momentum and start making progress towards your goals. Because even though we're in a down economy, it doesn't mean that you can't build your portfolios. In fact, a lot of people and these are the people who can build that momentum in the face of uncertainty and fear. These are the people who can actually grow their wealth during this time as opposed to shrinking their wealth.
Okay.
All right. So with that, we're going to dive into the presentation that we have for you. And let me just get that ready. Okay. And as we mentioned,
can you make this a little bigger?
Yep.
Thank you.
And as we mentioned, this is all about, I don't think I can. Oh, here we go.
There.
All right, here we go. All right. Okay. So yeah, what we're doing today, this event is called Building Momentum. And our presentation this morning is going to be about making progress in the face of uncertainty. Okay. And before we dive into our session, I just wanted to kind of run through the day with you. And so we're doing the opening session now. After our session, you have the agent experience session with Jesse. And he's going to talk about working with agents and getting the most out of the resources that we provide through Jesse, but also getting the most out of your agents. And then Kirsten and Cameron are going to talk about Empire Builders, again, how to make the most of your Empire Builders membership, and also talking about a 30-day action planner. And then we have a special session with Scott Clairhugh. Many of you guys know him from Caliber. Many of you have seen the announcement that the team, the Caliber team, including Scott, they're going to be moving over to another company called Movement Mortgage. And they're really excited about this move. They're going to talk about the benefits of making this move and how that's going to benefit you.
And what it means for all of you who already have loans with them too.
And then we'll wrap it up with Q&A. And this is kind of an open Q&A where we'll kind of talk about next steps and where you can go from here. All right, so let's kind of dive into what we're going to cover today. And so the first thing we're going to cover is the common obstacles that get in the way of progress. The next is how to break through when you're feeling stuck. And then finally, creating an action plan that gets you results. Okay. All right, let's start out by talking about the common obstacles. And before we dive into this, I wanted to kind of focus your attention over to the quote. And this is a quote from Marcus Aurelius. And this was brought to our attention in a book called The Obstacle is the Way. And his quote was, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, whatever is blocking your progress, that's the thing that you have to focus on and you have to overcome. And so we listed a number of common obstacles that many of you may have. You may have one of these, you may have multiple of these. And so the first one is having limited criteria. And the idea here is, when you think about investing and what we're doing here, we talk about cash flow, of course, but you got to remember that there are a lot of other components. There's the immediate appreciation, there's the forced appreciation, there's the buy and hold. You're going to be holding this property for a number of years. So it's not just focusing on how that property is performing that first year. You kind of have to zoom out and see how that property is going to perform over several years. And you guys probably remember from the training, we talk a lot about creating different scenarios. And that's where you kind of look at what could happen in year 1 versus year 2 versus year 3, but also what could happen if you tap into some forced appreciation opportunities. What could happen if you convert that property into a midterm rental, right? So, you're not buying something and keeping it static. You're going to make changes and improvements. And that's what we mean by limited criteria, is kind of narrowing that focus to just getting that 10% cash on cash return. You got to really expand that focus beyond that. You also have to look at the context of what's going on. If it's your first property, for example, and that first property is going to get you going. Sometimes we've had people in the community who have gone below that 10% cash on cash threshold just to get that first property under their belt, and then follow that with a property where they get 12 to 13% or more, just because they got started to build that momentum.
We've done the same thing, as some of you guys know. We've had opportunities which we've actually taken that have had lower than, let's say, 10% cash and cash return, but we could see the bigger picture of the potential for the property down the road. And so that made it worth it for us. And we also look at our whole portfolio and look across the portfolio and say, hey, like, how does this fit into our portfolio? And as you build your portfolio and you get larger and larger, you're going to start to see the different properties as chess pieces that you bring into your portfolio. And it may be that one property is stronger in cash and cash return and another property is stronger in that immediate appreciation or that forced appreciation. And so taking that kind of larger view, being able to step back and say, okay, how does this fit in my overall view? And do I actually want this property? And Jesse will be going more into detail with that in his section.
Another common obstacle, and you guys probably remember this from the courses, but not committed to a market. And you remember that, the people who didn't choose a market, they couldn't get past that step, and therefore they couldn't make the next logical steps with building your team and working with an agent and really getting to know your market.
And we've seen people get stuck here years and years and years. And the travesty of that is getting stuck and not making progress and never getting closer to your dreams and your goals. And so that's something that we really work on, is encouraging everyone to focus on one market when they first start out. Doesn't mean that you can't focus on multiple markets. Once you've learned how to do a market really well, you've created that kind of level of mastery in your body, you're able to expand out and go into multiple markets. And we know a lot of you who have been around for a year or two now are in 3-4 markets, but it all started with you choosing one market and focusing on that market. And so we wanted to bring that one up because we get a lot of people stuck at that first market.
Another common obstacle is not having enough money. And you probably heard about this a lot. And there's been a lot of content over the last year or year and a half where we talked about what are some ways that you can invest even though you have limited funds. And there are a lot of different ideas around that. There's a lot of content in Empire Builders talking about that. But it's not just the strategy, it's really the mindset. It all starts with the mindset of, yes, I can find a way to get the money to invest.
And everyone in real estate, we all run out of money. And so again, I want to draw you back to the obstacle is the way. You have to learn how to get better at accessing money, at looking at the different possibilities of money. And that problem is actually a gift because it makes you grow and you become stronger in this area. And now you know how to access money 10 different ways. That allows you to move to the next step in your investing portfolio, because now you have that, again, level of mastery that you can take, and you have to get through that in order to take that next step and be that person who grew and was able to handle more.
The next one is long distance investing. There I know that there are still people who are struggling with this, right? They start out and they're having trouble. They started out in their local market and having trouble getting out of that. I remember one student, that was their focus. They were quite successful in their local market, and their biggest impediment, their biggest obstacle was getting over that mindset of investing long distance. And what was cool to see was that she was able to actually break through that. She even posted in Empire Builders about overcoming that obstacle and successfully investing long distance.
And for those of you, as you're listening to us, if you can see one or more of these places that you're stuck, feel free to throw it in the chat, because there are many others with these kind of same fears and these same sort of blockages. And it's great to have a community to see that this is a reality that people are dealing with. And as we show you ways to get over this, you'll be able to also have that kind of group coherence to be able to know that other people are going to be able to help you along the way of a process of getting through this.
A really common obstacle, something that we haven't had to deal with until recently, is the changing environment. We see higher mortgage rates, we see inflation, we see a recession, and we see, frankly, sellers who have not adjusted their expectations. And so we still see high prices. And so it's not correlating, right? It's like ultimately you want to see those prices come down, but they haven't. So that's what we're dealing with in the current environment. And that's an obstacle, right? That's an obstacle to progress, because the current environment creates uncertainty, and uncertainty means I don't know where to go from here. And a lot of times that will cause people to take no action.
But I want to point out that a lot of you have dealt with this sort of change. It's not this exact change, but those of you who have been with us for the last couple of years have dealt with a lot of change in the environment. You've dealt with things being on fire up until about 6 months ago. And that was a change, that was an acceleration of the process already occurring, that was not necessarily there to that level 2 years before. And so the environment is always changing. This is just entering a new phase. And a lot of you have already gone through some changes. You've had to adjust. You've gotten stronger through those changes. And so I want to acknowledge that as we go into this next change, and we're in this next change, it's just one in the level of many changes that will continue to come, and we'll be in a different spot a year from now, and there'll be different challenges. So change isn't constant.
Yeah, so it's not really about the environment, right? It's actually about the fact that there's change, and that creates uncertainty, right? You figured out how to invest in a hot market. You figured out how to deal with COVID, right? Another big change, right? And now we're dealing with high rates, inflation, and a recession. And now it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, how do I succeed in this current environment? So it's the fact that, oh, it's a change, and actually it's a bit of a pain to have to adjust what you're doing. But once you figure it out, right, then you're going to be successful in the current environment until the next change, I think is what we're talking about. But if you really think about it, like Leti said, there really have been a lot of changes over the last couple of years. And what we've done is we've adapted to it every time. And we know that you're able to do that because we've seen so many people be successful in the different environments.
Well, it's what Darwin said too. I mean, it really goes back to that change is a constant in the environment and in the world. And this is just the next step. This is the next impediment in front of us that we need to overcome.
Right. Another one is not having enough knowledge or experience. I think it's a very, very common one. Of course, you guys took the course, you guys are Empire Builders, so you're gaining that knowledge and experience. But there's always, whenever you're pushing yourself, whenever you're exploring new opportunities, whenever you're going bigger, you're going to run into this uncertainty of, wow, I just don't know enough, right? I don't have enough experience. And that's going to cause you to feel uncomfortable.
And that's just part of the natural process, because it's what you need to do is expand your threshold of control. And many of you have heard us talk about that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
And then the last one we were going to bring up, and there are many other obstacles, as Leti was saying, I'm sure there's other obstacles that you guys can name, but not having the right relationships. And so if you're feeling like, oh man, I'm not seeing any deal flow, I'm not getting good deals, then that might be a thought that you have is, I just don't have the right relationships. And that can create uncertainty and make you feel uncomfortable. And the real key point here is that underlying all of these is uncertainty. And uncertainty oftentimes creates fear, and that causes you to take little or no action, and it kills momentum, right? And so the real challenge is, how do you overcome that uncertainty? And that's what we're going to talk about next. All right. So how do you break through that uncertainty? How do you break through that fear? And one of the things that I think makes Tony Robbins unique is because there are a lot of other teachers. If you look at somebody like Brooke Castillo, right? She'll say, well, you got to change your thoughts, which will change your feeling. So if you're feeling uncertain, you got to change your thoughts, which will change your feeling, which will change your actions, which will then change your results, right? And so it all starts for her with thoughts. What's a little bit different about Tony and what he adds to that is that he says that it's not just your thoughts, it's also your state. You need to be in the right state of mind in order to
Create that certainty.
Create that certainty within yourself. Exactly. And so it's not just the thoughts, but it's like the thoughts plus the certainty, right? And when you feel confident, and you guys might think back to your past when you were feeling really confident, right? You might have felt like you could just conquer the world. You could do anything. And that's the type of certainty that we're talking about. And what Tony Robbins teaches is that you can actually create that certainty within yourself. And you might not feel like it. Like, so right now, I don't know how many people here are feeling really uncertain, feeling kind of like not confident, feeling like they're stuck. Well, if that's the case, then we got to figure out a way to create certainty within yourself. And the triad is how you do that.
Yeah, I just want to draw attention to the fact that we're not talking about creating certainty starting with the results, like you have a good result and then that makes you feel good and now you know you can do it. We're actually talking about creating certainty within yourself before the result, the external result, is even visible. And that may sound really crazy and out there, but when you think about it, if you come in with a certain level of confidence, if you carry yourself with that belief that you're resourceful, that you can do anything, then that leads to different thoughts. Then that leads to different feelings, that leads to different actions, and then those ultimately give you the results, right? So sometimes you haven't done something before. It's completely new, right? You haven't invested in real estate before. You haven't bought that first property and made it cash flow before. But actually, even before having that result, you can start to gain that certainty. And that's what we're teaching you right now, is how do you gain that certainty that you are able to do something before you even have the result? And so how do you create that certainty that you're going to get through this period in the economy and the environment, or you're going to be able to get through this period where you haven't quite built your team to the level that you want, or you haven't quite chosen your market? How are you going to be able to get through that? By getting the results now, by getting the certainty now, even without the results.
Right. And so those of you who were with us at Unleash the Power Within, and this actually comes directly from Tony Robbins's website, you guys remember that we spent 4 days working on our state. And there was a lot of kind of jumping around. There's a lot of music. There was a lot of kind of really focusing on positive emotions like gratitude and appreciation and joy and excitement, and creating that within yourself. And so this is how you do that. This is how you create that state of certainty. Is first, all starts with your physiology. And physiology means you got to use your body. You got to involve your, you can't just sit here and focus, just have this part of your body, your brain active. You got to get your body going. And a lot of that is getting that heart rate up, getting that, getting the hormones in your body, the adrenaline in your body going. That's how you change it. And you can actually change your physiology. And you guys remember being up at 1 a.m., you can change your physiology even if you're tired at 1 a.m., even if you're post-call or whatever it is, you can get that, you can change that physiology. And you know this because if you're driving home post-call and all of a sudden you swerve into, you kind of drift off and you swerve into the other lane and you have a car coming right towards you, you know that what that adrenaline does to you, it wakes you right up, right? So you know that even in your most tired state, you can actually change your physiology in an instant. And that's what you're recreating here, is you're recreating that change in physiology, a really dramatic change in physiology from a low energy state to a really high energy state. And the idea here is that you'll be much more resourceful, you'll be much more creative in a high energy state. with the adrenaline going than in a low energy depressed state.
Yeah. And so some of the ways that Kenji and I do this for ourselves is actually working out and getting our body moving, dancing. And then we do a lot of kind of morning routine stuff. Some examples are priming and also meditation. And those kind of help with our physiology first. And that's where we start to create that certainty, because that's what's going to allow us to have better thoughts, feelings, actions, and results.
The next thing is focus. And so this one is when you are thinking about your goal, whatever your goal is in 2023, you want to achieve, let's say 100,000 in cash flow, right? And you go, gosh, how am I going to do that in this current environment with high mortgage rates and the recession, and I can't find deals, I don't have the right relationships. Well, when you start thinking about it from that perspective, then it does start to feel overwhelming. So what you really need to do is you really need to chunk down what you need to do into smaller pieces, and you really need to focus on what is the next thing that I need to do in order to make progress towards my goal. And that's where the focus comes in. And if you guys remember when I climbed the 50-foot pole, a telephone pole, and I'm afraid of heights, how did I overcome my fear of heights? Is I just focused on the next rung. I didn't think about the top. I didn't think about how I would get scared when I looked around, and I didn't think about freezing at the top and not being able to move. All I thought about was the next rung. And so similarly here, you want to be thinking about not the end goal and thinking about all the things you have to do to achieve that goal. You just have to focus on the next thing that you have to do to move the needle and make progress towards your goal.
And in addition to that, focus on what you want and pay a lot of attention to that, because the tendency in doctors is to look at what's wrong and to look at what potentially could happen that's a bad outcome. And we're not saying not to pay any attention to that. You do need to think about it. You do need to plan for it. You need to have contingency plans. You need to have a backup plan, but you need to spend a lot of your time focusing on what the great potential is and how to get there, and spend more of your energy focused on that positive outcome that you want. Because where energy goes, I mean, when focus goes, energy does truly go. And so if you're spending 90% of your energy looking at what could go wrong, you're missing out on the opportunity to focus on what could go right and move yourself towards that what could go right. So there really are two pieces of the focus. There's the focusing on the next step so you don't get overwhelmed, but there's also focusing on the outcome you want, not just looking at all the things that could go wrong. And I will also say that meditation really can help with that, because you can spend time with meditation focusing and visualizing that great outcome. And athletes do this all the time when they're practicing, when they're preparing for games, they're visualizing that outcome, right? And that visualization really does work, because you're spending a lot of energy and focus seeing what you want to have happen, and that will help you actually make that progress to make it happen in reality. Doesn't mean you don't take action. You still have to take action. You can't just only visualize, but that visualization piece is really, really important to help you get where you want to go.
All right. And then the third thing to change your state is your language. And this is the internal dialogue that many of us have about our situation, right? It's like, oh man, I've tried everything, oh, I'm a failure, or, why can't I get this right? Or why can't I do, why can't I make progress when everybody else around me is making progress? Right? This is that internal dialogue that you have. And I'm going to add a second piece to this. It's not just the internal, but it's also the things that you hear around you, right? It's the people who tell you, oh, you failed again, or you're not able to do this, or, you always try new things, but you always fail, right? It's like, it's you want to make sure that the language, both internally and the language that you hear around you, are supportive, right? Are helping you maintain that state, because you can imagine if somebody calls you a failure, right, that is going to bring your physiology down. It's going to bring your state down. You're going to feel really bad about yourself. And that can really lower that energy. And think about the next step, taking massive action. How do you take massive action when your energy goes down? And a big part of this is language, right? Is the language that you speak to yourself, but also the language you hear around you.
Yeah, the language that we say to ourselves is usually way harsher than we would say to anyone else. We've seen a lot of examples of that through, if you've ever attended one of Sunny Smith's coaching sessions, there are a lot of examples of that she shows with people when she's doing the interventions.
Sorry. Sorry.
And so when we beat ourselves up, we really do lower the energy, and then we're changing the focus, right? We're not focusing on what we want. We're focusing on just ourselves and all the ways that we think we failed. But remember, failing is learning. And again, if you can change that language that you talk to yourself in and that you say out loud, not just what other people are saying out loud, but also that what you're saying out loud. And so you hear us call people out on saying, well, I'll try this, or I hope this will happen, and changing that to it will happen. Those little shifts tell your brain, tell you that you're showing up differently. And so the language you use, both talking to yourself, talking to others, and that you surround yourself of the people around you using that language really makes a big difference. So one of the keys is to help keep each other accountable to this. All these things, the physiology, the focus, the language, if you master these, you create that certainty within yourself. It doesn't matter what happens outside of you at all. What matters is you're resourceful and you can handle it. And so the worst things that could happen, the obstacles, whatever obstacle they may be, that's the obstacle that you're going to take your resourcefulness to, and you're going to tackle, and you're going to overcome, and then you're going to go to that next obstacle, right? Because there will always be another obstacle, but that's an amazing thing, because each obstacle is giving us an opportunity to grow ourselves. Otherwise, we would stay stagnant and we wouldn't change, we wouldn't grow, and you wouldn't have that fulfillment of being able to grow. And so you work on these three, and the result is you take massive action because you have different thoughts, you have different feelings, you take that action and you build results, which then reinforce that certainty. And that that's once you get that momentum going of reinforcing certainty with the results and taking that certainty and creating even better results. That's that momentum that we want you to work on to help build your portfolios and then also build yourselves, because this environment that we're in right now is such an opportunity for us to grow and to build this momentum so that we're in a totally different place a year or two from now.
Yeah, I also wanted to make sure you guys understood that this is something that you're constantly working on, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that you do one time, or maybe you try it once and you go, it didn't work for me, right? This is something that it's like a muscle, right? You keep working on it. And even us, having been in this kind of mindset training for the last 4 years, we still come back to this very, very, simple concept, right, of state, and making sure that your physiology and your focus and your language are in the right place for you to be able to take that massive action. And so, like I said, I mean, just even today, this morning, we're talking about this, and so it's something that you're going to keep coming back to, and you're going to have to keep building that muscle to be able to kind of recognize, okay, I want to accomplish the goal. Let me work on my state and then take massive action. All right. So we talked about massive action. So we talked about, okay, being in the right state, and then the next step is taking massive action. And so, what we wanted to provide you with a tool for creating that massive action that takes into account a lot of these things that we just talked about. And so this comes from also Tony Robbins. It's called the RPM method, and we have a link at the end where you can actually go and watch a mini training on this. But this is kind of a high level of that training. And so the RPM method is a way for you to create an action plan, and starts with results, the purpose, and massive action. Let's kind of go through each one. So the first thing is, what is the result you're after? And you want to be very explicit about what that is. This is kind of similar to your SMART goals that we talked about during the course. And you want to kind of write that out, exactly what you want to achieve and in what time frame. The next one is really, really important. You want to start out with your purpose. You want to really define, why is this important to you? Again, going back to the course, this is your why, right? This is the type of thing that's going to help you pull you up the mountain, as opposed to you pushing something up the mountain. It's going to really help you achieve your goal a lot easier than you kind of pushing that heavy weight up the mountain.
One of the keys with the purpose is you see there's emotion linked, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to feel Why else? And this is really linking that emotion with what the result is. And so that you have that strong emotional pull. Those are that feelings part, right? You have the thoughts and the feelings involved, and that's going to help you take the action, sustained action long term, because the first thing you do may not work. It may take the 15th thing that you do that actually makes that work. And if you have a strong emotional reason and you have a clear vision of where you're going and why, then you're much more likely to be able to achieve that result than if you just create a to-do list and that's all there is behind a result that you want.
Yeah, and then the result and the purpose, that's the what and the why. And that's really where you want to start. And you've probably heard us say this before in other sessions, but it's very easy to get stuck in the how. How do I do this? And we call this the tyranny of the how. And so it's very easy to get stuck in the how. How do I do this? How do I do this? But where you really want to start is with the what and the why, and then the how will become very clear.
I'm just going to also add, before you do this, make sure your state is right, right? Make sure that you've got your focus, your physiology, and your language all together, and you're in a powerful state, an empowered state, so that you go into this and you really set those, big results, right? That you're not thinking too small, that you're not starting with, oh, what's reasonable in this situation? That's going to give you a very different result than you're like, yes, I can do whatever. What do I really want? There's totally different level of certainty. And again, you come to this with a lot of certainty in place because you've worked on your physiology, your language, and your focus.
And then the last step is massive action plan. And so for this, you want to brainstorm all the things you can do, and you really want to write down everything, even the quote unquote wrong ideas, because sometimes the wrong ideas can lead to the right ideas. Then once you have a big list, then one thing you can do is you can chunk those different similar actions into different groups. So you might have a list of 50 things, but if you actually chunk it into similar actions, then what you'll find is that list of 50 things actually becomes really more like 5 to 7. And then it becomes much more manageable. And then once you do that, once you have your 5 to 7, then pick the 1 or 2 that will have the biggest impact, and then really focus on them. And this kind of takes us back to the one thing, right? Focus on the one thing that if you do this one thing, it will move the needle the most. It will make all the other things maybe unnecessary or less important. And therefore, that's how you kind of want to proceed, is like really focus on the one thing.
And another way to say that is the 80-20, right? Is you focus on the 20% of things that really are going to make you the 80% of the results. And don't worry about the things that are maybe going to help incrementally make changes, but really focus on the big things. And, even if you get 80% there, that's amazing if you set a big result.
The next step is always be assessing your progress, because you want to kind of know how you're doing, and then adjust your plan accordingly. There may be a new idea that comes out of actually taking action, and that's why the how, you want to start there, because when you take an action, that may end up bypassing multiple hows that you had in place, and therefore it may make a lot of the hows irrelevant. So that's why you want to kind of start with what and the why, and then start taking action, the most important things at the moment. Once you accomplish those, then new ideas will come up, new action steps will come out of it. And that's why you want to really assess where you are. And if you need to change your action list, then you go change your action list and then pick the next important thing that you have to do. But if your list is still good the way it is, then go and tackle the next one on the list. Okay. All right. So we wanted to kind of give you an example of this in real life. And, this is one of the big uncertainties right now, is investing in the current environment. And so let's say that let's apply the RPM to this obstacle or this issue, right? And you have a goal and your result of bringing in 100,000 in cash flow in 2023. And the why is that because if you can accomplish this, it's going to help you achieve financial freedom, or at least get closer to it, so you have more time with family, and also can make your job optional. Or what we've seen a lot of people in the community do is make changes to their current jobs. Maybe they cut back, maybe they take a different job with no call, right? And these are the types of changes that you can make to significantly improve the quality of your life and really fulfill that why.
Now, obviously, we did a very simplified version of the result and especially the purpose. That should be fleshed out a lot more with that emotional tie. You know, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Again, the more emotion you can get involved, the much more likely you're going to be able to be driven through those tough times. So this is just a simplified example, but if you want to do this, make sure that you're doing that a little bit more intensely and spend the time to do it well and get the emotion involved.
Now, massive action plan, we didn't have any specific steps here, but we kind of broke down the different options for actions into mindset, strategy, and execution, because all are going to be really important. But starting with the mindset, we talked about creating that certainty using the triad. One idea that we love is anytime you are faced with something really difficult, and it doesn't have to be the current environment. It could be, let's say that, you're getting sued or something like that, or let's say that you have a really problem tenant, or let's say that somebody, gets arrested in your short-term rental, right? Whatever it is, let's say you have a big issue. Well, you can reframe it as something really scary, or you can change your language and say, this is a worthy challenger, right? None of the other problems are worthy of my attention like this one. This one is worthy of me really focusing, buckling down, and taking care of the problem. And so that's one way to kind of change the language to something like, this is not again, this is yet another problem, a big headache, another hassle. Instead, if you reframe it as a worthy challenger, it can kind of bring some of that fun element into it.
And I think that's the other piece that ties back into the obstacle is the way. It's actually each time you have a problem, if you can welcome that problem, because again, it's an opportunity to grow, right? If it wasn't an opportunity to grow, if you didn't need to grow in this area, you'd have it solved. But because it's something that you need to work at, you need to think about, that you need to be creative about, that means that this is your opportunity to grow and be stronger after this. So it actually should be welcomed. If you can get to that level, then you really will have mastered this mindset piece, because you'll look forward to problems.
Right. So for many of you, maybe the first step is creating that certainty with the triad, right? Getting your physiology up, changing your focus and your language. And then in terms of focus, we talk about the one thing that's really important. That's the part of what is the next thing as opposed to getting overwhelmed. And that's why we have it under mindset. Instead of getting overwhelmed, if you can really focus on the one thing, it becomes much more manageable. And so you really want to kind of think in terms of that, as opposed to overwhelming yourself by thinking about all the different things that you have to do. All right, in terms of strategy, we talk about, especially in the current environment, one of the things that you absolutely have to do is buy even better deals to overcome that higher mortgage rate or find better financing options. And of course, there's going to be a lot of hows. But again, what you want to really do is you want to focus on kind of what is the next thing that you could do. Maybe it is developing those relationships with agents, multiple agents, and we saw somebody in the community do that recently, and actually achieve quite a bit of success building new relationships. So that was great, massive action, and maybe better financing options, right? We've also seen a lot of posts about finding those local banks or finding those vice presidents that you can build relationships with at those banks so that they get you those better financing terms, and then also kind of going even beyond the traditional 30-year mortgage. Maybe there's some other better options out there. And of course, we have a session with Scott Clairhue later on, so you can find out about some of these financing options. But it's really about thinking about kind of what is the one thing that I can do to help me get those better deals or find better financing options.
And there's a really opportunity here in the strategy piece, to ask yourself some really great questions that help you generate the strategy. One of the questions is, maybe 5 years from now, you've 10x this 100K result. What did you do to get there, right? Ask yourself those kind of questions that really get your creative side involved. If you've already achieved that result, what did you do? It's just a different way of looking at the situation. Now, of course, you're going to say, hey, this is a great opportunity, this environment. And when I get through this, I'm going to be able to invest in any environment, right? That's the mindset piece. But then ask yourself the questions that make you reflect on the strategy piece and come up with better solutions to your answers. So maybe one other question you could ask yourself with the strategy is, how can I use my current properties to bring in 100K in cash flow in 2023? How can I add an additional 100K just with my current properties? That's my limitation. What would I do to have to do that? And so the strategy area is where you bring in those thinking time questions and really get creative.
Yeah, and then in terms of buying better deals, we have a little asterisk there that we wanted to highlight. And you got to remember that, this is the buy and hold strategy, right? This is buying properties, holding them as opposed to buying and then trying to sell them after you fix them up. So because of long hold times, right? If you, as long as you're cash flowing, then ultimately it doesn't really matter what happens to the value of the property. It doesn't matter once you lock in that mortgage rate. It doesn't really matter what happens to the mortgage rates. Ultimately, you should be able to continue to cash flow on an ongoing basis with the buy and hold strategy, as long as you bought the property right. And also remember that, especially in this type of environment, even though sellers haven't adjusted their expectations, I think this is probably one of the best opportunities for immediate appreciation. So that comes with negotiating. And we've already seen examples of people getting better deals by offering less right off the bat, which was unheard of before this recent change in the environment. And also people negotiating significant discounts in this environment. You just have to find the right seller in the right situation, and you should be able to find those immediate appreciation opportunities. And then the last one, forced appreciation. Forced appreciation is so important for not only counteracting that potential drop in value in the property, especially for those of you investing in short-term rentals, the property values may go down, right? And so
single family homes in general, even those of you who have long-term rentals that are single family homes, very likely that the property values are going to go down.
And so one way to counteract that is with forced appreciation. But if you're in a market where the values don't go down, then the forced appreciation is a way for you to mitigate risk. We've already seen some examples of people buying properties and there's short-term rental bans, HOAs are getting tougher. So, especially in that type of environment, you want to mitigate risk. Remember that forced appreciation is so important. And there are many ways to do that. When we talk about in Jesse's session, we'll talk about Jesse will talk about some recognizing some of those patterns, seeing properties that have been forced appreciated. Go to your agent and say, hey, I want this type of property, that has this type of opportunity. And if you can find it in a state where it's before it was fixed up, then that would be a great opportunity for forced appreciation. So that's Jesse will talk about more about that. So you don't want to miss that session. But that's an example of how you can find some of these deals. And then execution. So we talked about focusing on that next one thing. You always want to be thinking about, how can I be more resourceful, as opposed to telling yourself, I have no resources, right? I don't have the right contacts. I don't have the right knowledge. Some might even wonder, I'm not even in the right market, right? And so you really got to think about, how can I be more resourceful? And more resourceful could be surrounding yourself with the right people. It could be focusing on building relationships. It could be, thinking about different strategies and learning about different strategies from people.
It could be being the GC of your deal, right?
GC,
becoming a contractor, right? Getting that knowledge of how to GC a project, right? There's so many things that we've seen people do when put into a corner to become more resourceful, which is, again, they grew and they developed a new skill, they developed new mastery, and it only made them stronger. And so just another example of the obstacle is the way.
Yeah. And we have seen many examples of people who, again, these are pulled from Empire Builders, and hearing these stories of people finding deals and saying like, oh, I have an extra, there's another property that's available, and giving those deals to Empire Builders. And so it's a lot of this is kind of, if you have the right relationships, then those deals could come to you, right? As opposed to you having to figure out how to find those deals.
Yeah, and that's the example of who, not how. And we encourage you very much to read this book, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but just the ability to not only rely on yourself for everything, but use your resources of people around you to help you build. And that's thinking about who can help you with this, who already has those skills, who can I ask some questions to who can I hire to do this piece so that you're maximally using the skills you already have and focusing on the really important things, not getting tied up in the weeds. I know a lot of you are just starting out building your portfolio and you haven't gotten to the point that you start using leverage, that you start using others to help you build your portfolio. But that is the next step for you as you build your portfolio. And that's that who, not how as well.
All right. So one thing we wanted to do was to kind of get you guys started on your RPM. And so, this is if you, if you want to kind of create your RPM for 2023, just take 5 minutes right now to get this started. And then it probably will take more than 5 minutes, but we just wanted to kind of get you started. And then just for accountability, you can email that to us at support@semiretiredmd.com, or you can post your completed action plan in Empire Builders. And this is, I think, a really useful tool. And we actually have a link here too to the RPM method. So you're just going to get started now, take 5 minutes. But if you want to kind of really dive into the RPM method, you can kind of go to this link here. And I will, let me see, while we're doing the 5 minutes, I'll drop this link in the chat so you guys have it. Okay.
Okay, well, hopefully you guys got some really awesome ideas started. And again, we would encourage you to take some time and really put some thought into this in 2023. If you go in with a lot of clarity about what you want and a lot of emotional reasons why, you're going to end up very different place than if you just go in and see what happens to you.
All right. Yeah. And so we wanted to provide you some of those additional resources, some of the books we mentioned, and also the RPM method, which I pasted in the chat. And if you, so the rest of the day is, as we mentioned, is all about sharing some of the resources that are available to you, especially if you're in Empire Builders. And also, even if you're not in Empire Builders, you still have access to the agent network, as well as Jesse, who is a tremendous resource for you. He is an experienced agent, and he is also a wealth of knowledge in terms of working with investor agents. And so he can really help you there.
Maybe we could pull up the schedule one more time for people.
Yep. Okay. So let's kind of pull. Yeah, I know a lot of people you have kind of come in a little bit later. So for those of you who joined late, we just did the opening session. There will be a recording of this that will be made available if you registered for this. Then we'll have the agent experience with Jesse. We have the Empire Builders and talking about how you can make the most of your Empire Builders membership with Kirsten and Cameron. And then there's a special session with Scott Clairhue. He's going to talk about the move from Caliber to Movement Mortgage. And then we're going to kind of close with a Q&A, and we'll also kind of talk about some suggested next steps for many of you. Okay. All right.
Thanks for joining us
Thanks
this morning.
for joining us, and see you a little bit later. Let me just.
Okay, awesome.
All right,
Thank you,
guys. Thank you, guys. We'll see you a little later today. Okay. Have a
Thanks,
good day.
Lakey. Thanks, Kenji.